for the state of North Carolina. Do you agree with that assessment? And if so, what makes those standards more rigorous than the previous standards? And if not, why do you think the standards are not more rigorous? And I'll start with Dr. Atkinson.
Okay. I'm going to use personal experience. When I was at Stanton River High School in Bedford County, Virginia, I took geometry. I took higher mathematics courses. Unfortunately, I didn't have a very good Algebra 1 teacher. So when I got to geometry and Algebra 2, I had to memorize. And I memorized enough to pass the tests that were given to me. But I did not know how to apply geometry. I did not know how to apply algebra in a thorny issue problem. What the Common Core standards require in mathematics is that you be able to apply the knowledge with multiple step problems where you may have to add, multiply, subtract, divide, where you may have to set up a problem for which you do not have a formula. So from that perspective, they are more rigorous. But I guess a better way to say that is that they are more aligned to what our kids will be expected to do in community college mathematics and what they are expected to do in mathematics at our university system. And they're more aligned with what business and industry people require in the areas of mathematics and English language arts. The other thing that, and I'll go to the English language arts standards. For a long time, and I know I've written I don't know how many essays about this, coming back, oops,
Sorry.
oops, scared me. But I've written these stories, I bet practically all of you have written the story. What I did over the summer. Well, you know, that's okay. But the new English language arts standards require you to read documents such as Shakespeare or to read the Declaration of Independence and then make your arguments and then take information from that classical piece of literature or the Declaration of Independence or the Federalist paper and support your argument with points made in that document. Well, that is much more challenging than just to write what I did over the summer. So there are two examples of why I think that they're more challenging for our students and why they're much more aligned with what is expected here at Lewisburg in a freshman English class.
Thank you. Mr. Falkenberry.
Well, the term rigor is, I think we both admit, is a very vague term. When we were developing our standards back in the 1990s, before we had these standards, even in the state statute it said we were going to have rigorous standards. So we're always going to strive to have rigorous standards in the state. We understand that you need to modify your standards or update your standards every 5 to 15 years to change with the times of technology and what's going on in the world for the global business environment that we find ourselves in. The problem that you have is rigor sometimes can be developmentally inappropriate. And when the Common Core was being released back in 2010, we always go back to this letter of over 500 neuroscience, early childhood development specialists around the country that said these standards are way too developmentally inappropriate for the younger grades. And it didn't really click until at one of the state board meetings, they defined rigor for us, and they said rigor is what was taught at a later grade is now taught at an earlier grade. So at a certain point, yes, we want rigorous standards, but eventually it's going to push that down too far so that the child's brain isn't developmentally ready to take on these standards. And another thing that we focused on is several of the writers of Common Core that were supposed to sign off on it did not sign off at the very end because of the math standards towards the end, 8th through 12th grade. And what they said is it's going to shrivel up our STEM pipeline. And STEM is a big thing for our state, especially with the research triangle that we have here in our university system. And what they said is the math standards, what you usually were going to accomplish in 8th grade is now going to be accomplished at 9th grade with Algebra 1 And by the time you get to your 11th, 12th grade, you're not going to be able to take that pre-calculus or even trigonometry, which isn't going to prepare you to take calculus at the university level. So it's going to put everybody behind. I'm not an expert on standards at all. I don't claim to be, but I do listen to the experts, and when a lot of experts are saying the same thing, I think it's time that we at least take a look at these standards and review them and see if that is the case.
Would you like to respond to this?
Yes, Jamie mentioned the 500 people who said that the standards were not developmentally appropriate. We have to put that in context. The context that there are over hundreds of thousands of people in the United States with those professions as a pediatric doctor or as a pediatrician. And while I respect the opinions of pediatricians, I know that that list of 500, there's just one person from North Carolina who is a teacher. And that teacher's objection is that the standards don't address the social and emotional, the standards don't address the social and emotional and physical needs of children. Well, the standards weren't intended to address the social and emotional needs of children. That is a bigger picture. The standards were developed to address what students should be able to do in kindergarten, to count to 100 by ones and to count to 100 by tens. And so for those of us who have been teachers, we know that in a typical classroom, you will have students who will be beyond the standards, you will have students who will be at the standard, and you will have students who will be below the standard. And that's why it's really, really important that people really take this to heart, that it's the teacher in the classroom who has to make the decision and where the starting point is for that student. Also,
Well, I was going to say that I'm sure that we're going to get to